Welcome to Counterculture, a talk show normally in a diner.
Your body temperature is normal.
Joining me on tonight's show, and legendary network television producer and executive, Ernie DeMassa.
When people say to me, what did you do on the Oprah Winfrey Show? And I say, basically, I stood back and got out of her way.
All right here on Counterculture. Hi, folks. I'm your host, Grover Silcox, coming to you from Lehigh Valley Public Media's Studio B, while we wait for the go-ahead to return to our original home at Daddy Pop's Diner in little old Hatboro, PA. My next guest, I would call a legend, not in his own mind, but in the annals of television history. He produced The Mike Douglas Show. He launched Regis Philbin's career. He wrote and produced for talents such as Oprah Winfrey, Billy Crystal, and Charles Grodin, just to name a few. He oversaw programs including Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, and Hollywood Squares. He helped create and produce Inside Edition. He's currently president of Vista Media, a full-service new media and production agency. His awards and recognitions go on and on, including, of course, he's a Philly guy, born and raised. Ernie DeMassa, welcome to the show. Welcome to Counterculture.
Well, Grover, it's so nice to be with you. And yes, I was born at St. Agnes in South Philadelphia.
Right on Broad Street, South Broad.
Yeah. My dad was a surgeon there.
Is that right?
Yeah.
How about that? You went to LaSalle, was it for psychology?
Yes. Yeah, I got a degree in clinical psychology. I actually got my master's at Temple and was working on my PhD at the time at Villanova when I ended up fully employed by Westinghouse.
You have had so many interesting roles in your television career. Did it start on The Mike Douglas Show? Is that where it began?
Yeah, in 1969, I started as a, what we called in those days, a production assistant on The Mike Douglas Show. But what was great about it is that we had 6 people on that staff back then. When I did Oprah, we had 200 people on the staff. So I did cue cards. I actually ran camera at a time. I booked transportation. I answered the phones. I wrote segments. You know, you just learned how to do everything. Right.
Mike Douglas Show is based in Philadelphia.
Yeah, we were the #1 show on daytime television for 21 years. The show had an unusual format in that Mike did the show by himself, but with a celebrity co-host who stayed for the week. So we would do 5 90-minute shows live in the first early days until Zsa Zsa Gabor got us off being live. If you know the famous 7 words that George Carlin used to talk about that we couldn't use on television, she used 3 or 4 of them. And the FCC called us that afternoon, and the next day we started on tape delay.
Wow.
The other unusual thing about the show was we didn't do a one-on-one with guests. We had the first guest come out, and then we built a panel. A fellow by the name of Woody Frazier created the show, brilliant producer, along with Roger Ailes. And, they came up with this idea that the panel should stay and talk to each other. So where else in the world could you have Milton Berle talking to Richard Pryor? There were just so many wonderful people, everybody from Paul Newman to Sophia Loren to Ingrid Bergman to Bette Davis to Alfred Hitchcock. My all-time favorite guest ever, Fred Astaire, who I just loved. What a charming gentleman. Jimmy Stewart, Bob Hope, George Burns, Jack Benny, you just name it. Anybody that was anybody in the 60s and 70s did that show. And politics, we booked a lot of politicians.
Right.
Booked a lot of sports figures. You have to remember there was no internet, there was no social media. So we would read 5 or 6 newspapers a day, take somebody out of the headlines, call them up and get them down to Philadelphia and put them on the show. I'll never forget, I was a young man and just had gotten married, and I went to the Westinghouse management and I said, I keep hearing these rumors you're going to move the show to Hollywood. And no, that's not going to happen. Go get a mortgage, buy a house, don't worry about it. Same day I signed my mortgage papers, they told me we're moving to Hollywood.
Right.
So we picked up and left and came out here. We didn't want to come. The executives moved us.
Wow, but you never looked back, and then the career just took off from there.
When Mike went off the air finally, I met Regis Philbin, who had a local show in LA.
Right.
And NBC wanted to put him on the network, and we went out and we won an Emmy together. And then I was lucky to meet the King brothers, King World, which does not exist anymore, but people can look it up. We had an amazing run of 20-some years and became the largest entertainment company in the world with Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, Oprah, and then Inside Edition.
Of course, we lost Alex Trebek, and you knew him pretty well, right?
Alex was just a wonderful man. I met Alex in 1983. Actually, the King brothers, there were 6 brothers and sisters that ran King World, and their mother loved Alex Trebek, who had been a Canadian host at the time. He was hosting a Canadian show and a game show, and had just come down to the States. And when they were going to bring Jeopardy back, I remember Roger used to say, people would say, as we were relaunching the show, well, it's an old show. It was on. It got canceled. Why are you doing that old show? And he'd say, well, we're changing nothing except the host, the game, the rules, and the contestants. and the set, by the way. But the King brothers' mother loved Alex Trebek, and he got the job. And what a wonderful human being, a truly terrific person, a real student of what he did. He went in there. He studied those questions. He made sure all the pronunciations of every word he was going to say were correct. He didn't want anybody to feel, misguided in answering, giving an answer to a question, So just a wonderful human being, and so sad to lose him.
You were also involved, it was a pivotal moment when the first female minority host was given a platform in daytime television with Leslie Uggams.
I got hired by NBC to help create a show called Fantasy. Was that you could write us a letter and ask for anything in the world as long as it wasn't for you and you had a good story. So Peter Marshall from the original Hollywood Squares was the host, and we needed a co-host, and we auditioned a bunch of people. A bunch of people came through there, and Leslie was just wonderful, and Leslie still is wonderful.
How many times have you said it, thought it, or if only had a second chance to do something that's really important, or to undo something?
I didn't put her on the show because she was black. She was just the best person to do the job. The network came to me and they said, we put the first black woman host on daytime television. And then 2 or 3 years later, along came Oprah. When people say to me, what did you do on the Oprah Winfrey Show? And I say, basically, I stood back and got out of her way.
Is it Vista Media is now your company?
Yeah, it's my own company. We do media of all forms, and it's not always television now. Matter of fact, my license plate on my car is TV or not TV, because it doesn't really matter whether it's TV. It's the content that counts and how you receive the content.
Right.
And if you make great content and deliver it, people are going to consume it and enjoy it. Television has changed. Streaming has changed it. YouTube has changed it. The way people consume the product on an iPad or on a phone. So it's a different world, and you have to create content for what the medium can accept.
And we want to talk about your involvement as a board member with the Lucy Pet Foundation organization and what you're doing for cats and dogs.
My dear friend Joey Herrick, who's just a brilliant man I've known for 45 years, he was my variety show drummer for many years. He started a little pet food company with Dick Van Patten called Natural Balance. And Joey wanted to give back, so he asked me to help him, and I joined him, and we created a foundation. We do free spay and neuters of dogs and cats. One feral cat on the street by itself in a 7-year period can produce over 400,000 offspring. So the key is free spay and neuter, and we've now controlled the population pretty well of dogs in Los Angeles. We'd like to get this spread out across the country. Cats are tougher. Most animals that go into a shelter never come out, and it's sad because they're adoptable, and a rescue is the best pet you could ever have.
Ernie, I want to thank you so much. Really, I feel like I was walking through the history of television. No matter how much television, or whatever you want to call it, changes, you'll be part of it.
Thank you, Grover. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, same here. Thanks so much for joining us on Counterculture. Ernie DeMess, a man who has not only worked in television, but served to shape its history as a creator, writer, manager, and producer. Best of all, he's still very much an important contributor to this amazing and ever-changing medium. Well, that's all for this episode. I want to thank my guests, broadcast TV veteran and author of I Dare Me, Lou Ann Kahn, the madcap former writer of Mad Magazine, Joe Raiola, and legendary television producer, writer, and executive, Ernie DeMassa. And thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to stop in next week for more amazing guests and great conversation right here at the counter.